Hello.
Hello, hello. Sorry I couldn't make the normal meeting. How was it? Or if you were on it, if you were able to be
It
on
was good.
it. Yeah, good. I suspect people will be meandering their way across for a couple of minutes, so we'll see. Um, and I am not 100% sure what our first 30-minute call is going to be like, so we'll see how it goes. Um, but hopefully we'll start to get into a trend or a pattern.
It was exciting to get an actual invite for it without,
Yeah.
without actually having to go out and find. I did go out and find it, but I noticed I had a separate invite. Just
Yep. Do have
it's
to sign up
magic.
for it, which is a thing, but it's yeah. So I was just saying I think we're gonna give people a minute to get here as y'all join. Welcome, welcome.
Good evening, Abby.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I might be echoing back. Oh, I came back. Okay.
Probably me. I'll move the mic. There we are.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you can see it's so dark out.
Yeah.
No. No.
And it'll be the same in Salt Lake City as well, right?
You have a weird, gotta figure out why that light is shining down on me in that way. New position for the camera, so I gotta figure that one out.
Looks like a new view. Are you back home now then?
I am. It's mostly home. We'll see. There is some missing area rugs and there are some things and stuff to do, but we've been hard at work for the last, I took 5 days. So I took Thursday through Monday and just we've been doing long days of trying to move back in. So mostly there. Mostly
Good.
there. Yeah.
Abby, how much time do we have today on this one? Because I need to hop over to my panel talk one, but I wasn't sure if this was only 30 minutes.
It is. So it's 26 more minutes. So we had said that we wanted to keep it short and sweet and actionable rather than allowing things to sort of fill the time that is allocated. I suspect that this one is going to be mostly a level setting as much as we hope to hit the ground running this week, given the numbers of people here and I'm seeing some new faces to this piece of work, which is awesome, which is why we set up these calls in this like structured way, but it means that we want to get everyone on the same page. So and with KubeCon next week, I just took the executive decision of not having this call next week because just the numbers of humans and the energy levels and all that. I think even the week after might be tough, but I think we try for it and we keep going. So I think we've got something like 12 weeks, no, sorry, 10 weeks of this scheduled with, but it covers like 13 weeks because we've skipped KubeCon, Christmas, and New Year's because it falls on the Tuesdays fall on like KubeCon, Colo Day for platform engineering, Christmas Eve, and New Year's Eve. So like, attendees will be near zero for those 3 days. So, um, but what I've just shared in the chat is a Google Sheet, which has the attempt to ask some questions or collect some questions for the assessment. So um, I figure I don't like to start I like to give a couple minutes for people to join, but if we start too late, then we just encourage everyone to be late to these things, and it sort of is like a perpetuating thing. So I'm going to kick off, and we have the recording. I'll make sure it gets to YouTube, and it'll get sent to anyone who signed up for the meeting but can't attend. So we'll just go. Yeah. So this sheet. Sorry, back it up. We've decided we're going to do weekly meetings about this piece of work because we've been having a hard time kind of breaking the back on what the hard part of this, which is creating questions. What we're trying to achieve is we're trying to achieve an assessment tool that can be picked up by any platform engineer, human at an or IC, individual contributing human at an organization, and help them place themselves on the platform maturity model and then provide them some like direction of where they might look for more information next. So where are some key hotspots that they could benefit from investing in? So they may have a particular gap in a certain area, and we can suggest them to a blog post or to some of the research that's being done, or so on. It's quite a big piece of work to do all of that, because what we need to figure out how to evaluate where someone should be on the maturity model, because the maturity model is not 4 is the best and everyone should be a 4. We need to understand where they actually should be based on the needs of their organization. We need to evaluate where they are based on their current behaviors in the organization. And then we need to create some sort of a way to compare those two and decide if there are areas that are particularly heavily valuable for them to invest in. So if they have, a small gap in one of the aspects, but then has a big gap in another aspect, we may say that. Or if we find that certain aspects are dependent on each other, we might, build that into sort of the model to say, hey, if this aspect is lower than this aspect, you've got to invest in this other one first, because we find that without that, you can't progress, right? So there's sort of 3, I'd say, pockets of work that need to be done. And then the 4th being the actual content collection, hopefully more so than creation, but there probably will be some creation of what to actually provide people if we say, hey, the thing you should be investing in is adoption. As an example, where do we point them to be able to understand how to move from level 1 to level 2 adoption, or so on, or just to understand adoption better, even if it's not that we can give them directions on how to, or instructions on how to move between the levels. So it's quite a big piece of work, and I think that so I think it's helpful to once in a while reiterate like the scale, so that we know that we aren't trying to solve all 4 problems on a single, call or a single like focus area. And so the understanding that big picture, narrowing into now, the current plan, the current focus is how do we get to know where people are on the model. So we're not going to figure out where they should be. We're not going to figure out where we should be telling them to invest. We're not going to be telling them where to find content on how their investment could look like. We're just saying, where are you on the model? To do that, we think that we want to ask a reasonable number of questions. Reasonable is as long as a piece of string. But reasonable is something like a handful of questions times the number of aspects. So we have 5 aspects, thinking no more than 5 questions, meaning we're looking at no more than 25 questions, is sort of our like finger in the air idea of where we want to be. Do we think that it is 5 questions about investment and 5 questions about adoption and 5 questions about interfaces, or it's 25 questions that sort of some of them span a couple of those? We're not sure yet. So there's still a lot of room to figure out what good looks like on this. But the way the current trajectory that we'd like to sort of push, I would advocate we push forward a little bit further to learn from it before we try and pivot, if we try and pivot, is that we start by coming up with questions that are per aspect, and then we can review those and we can basically come up with a pool of questions that we're all pretty comfortable with. And then when we can come back around and say, okay, so here's our pool of questions. If we were to ask all of these, what would that look like? What gaps do we have across the aspects, or what looks like duplication of question that we could trim down, or so on. So so the last thing I'll say, because I've had a now 5-minute monologue, is that the reason for these calls is that we wanted to have people do some like basically pre-work of adding a bunch of any questions they think would be valuable, any questions they think would be useful to this spreadsheet. And I think we've had Valentina join. Hi, Valentina. So I'm going to resend the spreadsheet. So have people join, ask the questions in that spreadsheet with the format of the question in column A and any answers between 2 and 4 possible answers. So either a binary true, false, yes, no, or a multiple choice with up to 3 or 4 answers in columns C through F. So that's the way that spreadsheet's set up. And basically drop any questions you want. Don't worry about the number of questions already on the sheet. Don't worry about perfect grammar. Don't worry about, perfection in any way. What we're trying to get is ideas out on the board. And then in this call, we can basically have the sort of deeper kind of synchronous conversations of like, hey, this question uses words that trigger a different expectation within my organization. Can we talk about those words? Hey, like, I feel like we're not asking, I feel like these 3 questions all ask sort of the same thing. Can we pick our favorite? Hey, those kinds of questions. And until we can get to the point where the questions on each of these tabs are ones that we're confident in. And so the proposal is basically start from the tab on the left, and as we get done with it, we move across to the right. So investment is our first one that we're going to tackle. In looking at this, I can tell you that there have not been more questions added since last week. So I do not believe that this is the week to deep dive on, are these the right questions? I think this is a good level setting and getting us prepared to do this piece of work. But yeah, so that's the proposal on the table, the kind of trajectory of this piece of work, and the higher level picture first and foremost. So how does that sound? Is anyone who's here before, keep me honest if that's was the intention of these meetings. I think it was, but I may have misheard or misunderstood something as well.
Yes, Abby, I think I was there in the last meeting. So you describe and prescribe perfectly well. I think many of the folks are not available today on the call, but I think you summarize it very perfectly. So what I'm actually getting it, like, for us to have some comments or anything, this should be from the Excel sheet that you actually shared on the comment section.
Yep. And definitely like, everybody's got time. So first of all, thank you for confirming, saying, because as you say, we definitely lost some of the consistency from the last meeting. So that's really helpful. And to your point, the priority would be to start from you can start from the left on the sheets. So you can add questions anywhere. If you think of a great question for adoption, please, please, please just put it in the sheet now. But if you're like, hey, I've only got an hour to allocate this week to think about this stuff, please focus on investment, because that's what we're going to be discussing first. So you can sort of prioritize yourself starting from left to right on the sheets. But yeah, Valentina.
Hey, so great to see everyone. Very excited about next week. A lot of work to do. Probably you guys are as well, trying to finish sessions, all of that. But so because I may be missing, I missed a couple of minutes. I'm just wondering, like, what is the outcome? What is that we are trying to achieve with this assessment?
Yeah, so the 1-sentence version of it, because I unfortunately did cover that a bit. I just don't want to make everyone else sick of my voice. But the one sentence version is we want individual contributors at organizations to be able to self-assess where they are on the maturity model in comparison to where they want to be, or their organization needs them to be on the model, and then hopefully point them at useful resources to help them with any gaps that are identified. So I'll just pull out some key things there. That's individual contributors. We have a lot of amazing consultants in our team here, of like creators for this, but it is something that consultants can use with their clients, but it should be self-serve as well. And I would also call out that it's something that has to be done within the context of an organization. So I'd say those 2 things are worth making sure are I don't believe we can release something that doesn't take those 2 things into account. So
yeah, it reminds me of that tool we have that we do that for apps. So I think this is great. Like, where are you on your maturity level? Are you thinking on moving this into a sort of like website as well? Or, because I think that would be great.
Possibly.
Click, then gaming, and then love it.
I could imagine this being a self-serve website, so that somebody could do it internal in their organization. I could also imagine it being a hosted CNCF thing, so that on our website, so we could collect public data. I could see a lot of things, but that's honestly where we were getting a bit enamored by the UI portals hashtag, and we were kind of neglecting the deeper questions. And so we're taking a step back as a team and say we have some really awesome UI ideas, but if we don't have the right questions, it doesn't matter how we display it. And so that's the kind of focus on our questions for the next sort of period of time. And when we get to those questions, then we've got we can start plugging them into the different interface ideas that people have, like, which includes a website, includes a spreadsheet, and a few others. So
yeah, great, good, thank you.
No, thank you, David.
The only thing I would have said for these meetings is maybe capping it off with being accountable to each other to making some sort of progress in between, right? Which I know is tough, but sometimes a little bit of public commitment can help with that. Even if it means the 15 minutes before the meeting, you go in and scribble something, right? That's
Yep.
progress. So.
Yep. And there's a world where we do, you know, there's the like pre-read in the meeting format that some people do at an organization. I think Amazon was famous for that. Like if we find that people aren't able to carve out time during the week, but do care enough to show up to these calls, we could use these calls to create the list of questions that can then be more asynchronously reviewed or whatever as well. So I think it's about using this 30 minutes for the highest value thing, because the thing I like, so there's moments when as a lead of the working group, one of my jobs is to make sure we're working on something that is going to be valuable to the community, right? And it's something that we are going to have the right level of sort of review and input into to make something that's high value. So I'm always keeping an eye a bit on like, is this a thing that is going to have the kind of impact that we can have in the community, and going to have the level of investment from our working group attendees and participants that to create something of value. And I always sort of wonder when like you're not making progress on something, is that a sign? Is this not something that we have to do? But the level of like investment on coming to these calls and of like chat in places is so high. There's something about making this actionable that we haven't connected, because we've got the energy, we've got the people, and we're not getting the outputs. So that's why we're trying this new format and hoping, to your point, David, to hold ourselves accountable and also to build in the space to have those conversations. And I, for one, I held up my hands a few weeks ago and said, I'll see you at the end of November. Like I'm absolutely to the brim right now coming into KubeCon, and I think other people may feel similarly. So I'm hoping that we
might get a little
that.
done over the next couple of weeks, but the end of November, I'm assuming that another outcome is that we'll have something to say at KubeCon London. Like
Yes, that is one of, so I think, I mean, there was a hope that we'd be able to like release something complete by then. I think if we even had the ability to have a survey we had confidence in for people, and ideally the survey to incorporate where they should be based on the needs of the organization with where they are, that would be an awesome target for London. You can get lots of feedback at the booth about where, and just walking around about how that might like actually land at organizations, and that can really drive the next thing. Exactly.
We could be like those people on the street.
Just like little tick marks, give them pen. Exactly. I expect to have, I actually want to have a sandwich board that has little like drop a token in, you know, like collectors. So yeah, no, I think it was a great point, David. And we definitely do need to, we need to make sure that we are investing in the right things as a working group, and confirm that continues to be this, and hold ourselves, if it is this, hold ourselves accountable to making progress. So good point. Valentina.
Yeah, so no, I just want to share a couple of ideas. So I work on the past on a tool that it wasn't measuring platform, it was measuring more like modernization, but the idea was kind of the same. Like through an assessment, we will give you where you are and what are the next steps. So two of the problems we had with time was one, some of the questions that at that time when we created make a lot of sense, but when technology changes and adapted, it was like, this is not, people are not doing this anymore. So we needed to, make updates, and how we can keep that in a way that is updated, with the industry. The other problem we had was not everyone was, of course, every industry and company is different. So each company will be doing things differently. So some of the questions were like, hey, this will not apply to everyone. So I guess one idea could be like, what are the 2-3 pillars in each stage that are like the core that will define, that maturity level. So maybe if we find out those 2-3 things that we believe will be consistent in every industry and kind of across time during the year, I don't know, we can span it in a year. It could be like, okay, if someone is not doing this, for sure are not in stage, I don't know, 1, just to say that. Because what I'm afraid is we start throwing a lot of ideas and things, but it may not apply to everyone. Like how we can, make sure that this can apply to everyone, and this is in the core stage, or maybe people are doing some pieces, but not 100%. So I think like finding those core truths per each stage could help us keep us, really have a good reflection on each of the stages, and with that we can derive different questions. But I don't know, maybe we already did that, so I don't know.
No, I think
Yeah.
that it's a good point. It would make life easier if everything looked the same. But one of our lessons learned when doing the maturity model itself was that like it can look different to have the different levels. Like you can achieve the outcomes looking differently. And so I can't promise that we were perfect. Hindsight 2020, you learn more as you read this back, but I remember that two of the big things that we did that I'm really happy that we did, and I can see aging well-ish from at least as of yet, a year on, is that we made sure to try and stay away from implementations inside the table itself. So in the longer details, we have some implementation examples, but in the table itself, it's more about outcomes or higher level behavior, so more durable things. And then the second being that we named the levels based on the like business requirements at a certain scale. So rather than just sort of I'm a maturity 3, which everyone always ends up falling back to numbers. Don't get me wrong, I'm not naive here, right?
Like
but
this.
like, but we set the stage for having a conversation about like what does it look like to be optimizing versus what does it look like to be scaling or scalable, and what does it look like, those kind of things. So
Good.
so I think like I totally hear you on that. Concrete's going to be a key to our success, and I think figuring out what's concrete. Is concrete the practices? So like if you're not doing TDD, you're not, and TDD is not even on
It's hard, yeah.
involved in our model, right? Which is why I'm using it as an example. But if you're not doing TDD, you can't be level 3. Or is like, well, if you think about what TDD does, it's about like building in design as you go, building the smallest thing that works. Like there's other ways you can achieve this, like without TDD maybe. And how do you package the outcomes of that practice without declaring that practice as the thing that is what makes someone successful? We can use that practice as an example, but like, yeah. So
yeah, it's hard.
That's the hard work. That's the hard work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
No, but I love this. I would love to help. Yeah, no, but I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I just
And
wanted
it's
to make sure because could be a problem if not. But
so the distinction you're making, Abby, is a little tough sometimes for people to grasp because it's practices versus
principles or whatever.
Toolbox, right?
Yeah.
And everyone wants to go in with their toolbox, and I've seen people like, hey, you built a platform on AWS, you're starting up with Azure, you should bring what you learned over. And they immediately think, well, the code's not going to work. Well, yeah, I mean, don't try and make the code work. Make the fact that you built a platform, did it in a certain order, accelerated things, right?
Yeah.
Use that.
Exactly.
So it's this sort of meta model stuff that I think people have a bit of trouble with. That I like the fact that the maturity model focuses in that way, and if we can help the assessment kind of get people thinking along the same lines in that, and it's also healthy because, as you keep saying, not everyone has the same implementation, right? So defining what good looks like when it's so variable by organization, I think would not be a good service to the community, because they would say, oh, I need to implement Canoe and then I'm done, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I think like the other requests we've gotten for more technical content, one of the ways to deal with that is to have a variety of implementation scenarios listed, saying, if
examples.
you're adopting this type of technology or whatever, and show that you can do self-service platforms with a variety of things, not just Backstage, right?
Yeah. I'm optimistic when I look around the room in the working group as a whole, and this room in specific, as well as past calls on this topic, that we have a seniority of engineer, that I have optimism that we have the like ability to think in those kind of principles or higher level meta ways. I think actually one of our biggest risks is that the reason that this
I just lost Abby. I don't know, it's just me.
We lost Abby.
Yes, Abby's lost, I believe.
Yeah, I can almost extrapolate what she was going to say in that we would make it too abstract. And we run the risk of losing people because we don't have enough concrete stuff for them to latch onto. And we make it too abstract, too principle based, rather than having it tied, into ways that people can understand at their level, right? Because we're saying we want individual contributors to be able to work with this. So that means they need to be able to understand things from an individual contributor level.
I
Internet.
guess, yeah, I guess Tricky, what will be next steps then? I mean, a KubeCon or I don't know.
Well, so I don't think, well, it might be neat at KubeCon if people wanted to get together and just hammer on stuff. And try and get through some of the sections. But what I was going to do was I've been particularly interested in investment, so I was going to try and commit to adding to a couple of questions there for maybe when we get back from KubeCon, and then look at other sections of it as well. Um, I'll try and add 3 questions across the sheet. Right.
Great. So one thing, I know we have the platform engineering coffee. Is the
Yep.
idea also to use step time to, I don't know, I'm throwing the idea, I don't know if it was
What's
planned or
that?
not. I'm throwing the idea, I don't know if it was planned or not, to maybe use those spaces to also, propose these questions and, do working group sessions
So
or.
the platform coffee is just entirely attendee driven. So it's like a dot voting post-it note type thing where you spend 8 minutes per topic roughly. So it's not a and I don't know that we have any kind of space anywhere for like a working group session, which would be nice. I know that they did that way back in Chicago, but we didn't do anything like that in Paris, and I feel like it would be valuable to try and do something like that. Maybe it'd just be a
Yeah.
dinner or something.
Yeah.
And you'd suggested that on the previous call, David, right? The one that would just come off.
Yeah.
And it's a great shout. I think when we land, some of us will be there obviously on Tuesday for the platform engineering day. I think that's the first day we get. Well, actually, it's Wednesday is the first day we get into the booth area, isn't it?
Yeah. We don't get in on
Tuesday. No, it's Wednesday. So it'll be Wednesday before we find that place, right? But some of us are at least there on Tuesday. There are big spaces on Tuesday that can be used as well.
Well, and I think there's 2 separate things here. The thing I was suggesting was another I wouldn't call it open spaces because that tends to be more multi-topic and a little structured a little differently. It would just be an afternoon lean coffee. I think we could additionally say just save some other time for the working group to just have discussions around working group stuff to be a little more formalized like we usually do.
Yeah.
And not like a lean coffee format. And I don't know if they're planning to have, someone mentioned like, yeah, the picnic table. I don't know what the space looks like in Salt Lake City if they do the same thing they did in Paris with, essentially the trade show floor and then lunches around it. 'Cause then that make it really easy to find space to do things.
Yeah. I don't think anyone knows other than the CNCF, right? Because nobody's been able to check.
I kind of thought maybe people had been like, I don't know what it was like in Chicago, or like if they try and set up the space in similar ways in whatever venue, maybe they just have it's a big conference, so they have certain venue requirements now. But all right, we're at 12:30 and Abby is not coming back. All right.
Yeah. I sent her a message.
Oh, there's Abby joining
she's
to
not.
see us off. So Abby, I committed
Yes.
to working on 3 questions over the next 2 weeks.
Amazing. That sounds great. And I will get all the videos up so people can review this, advertise it, and push people to do it. And yeah.
And last thing we were talking about at the end, is there some way for us to get like an ad hoc working group meeting together while we're there?
Throw it in the Slack would be my advice.
Okay.
and I would also recommend reviewing the other things on the schedule. So there's there's a tag level panel, and there are platform group hours at the booth, and I would avoid
Yep.
both of those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And lightning talks, I'd avoid those 3 things. And aside from that, I would say pick your battles.
Yeah.
Like, pick a day. If you want to do it at the coffee, like, that works too. I don't think mornings is a great
Well, I was
shout, if I'm being
avoiding,
honest, but
Valentina
it's
mentioned that,
like,
but I was kind of
yeah.
avoiding the coffee. But if we wanted to, we have 4 coffees, so you know, it
I
might be
think
worth.
mornings are tough for some people, but it's also more available for a lot of people. But like, yeah, so I'd say, and also I'd avoid Friday, travel day and stuff. So
I won't
maybe
even
like
be there.
something on Thursday
Or Tuesday.
Yeah.
You
or
know, the platform
Tuesday.
engineering day, the lunchtime was huge in Paris.
Yeah. That's because everyone's gonna be busy watching the talks, Chris.
Well, the thing is, there were no other, there was no booth crawl or anything like that
Yeah.
open. So there was a lot more time on the Tuesday actually to
Everyone
have
was in the
conversations.
lunch. Yeah.
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 Yeah, throw it out there. I would say my only point being, throw it out in the Slack and see, maybe start like, you could try a poll, but also possibly just put something out there and go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have
So
some
yeah.
schedule stuff to figure out if I'm gonna. 'Cause you weren't there, Abby, but I proposed an afternoon lean coffee, um, just to put in. So I was gonna figure out where that might fit with those things you mentioned. All right.
Lean
Perfect.
live.
All right. See you
Awesome.
all next week, I think.
See you in
Yeah.
See
person.
you.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Safe
Bye, y'all.
journeys.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.